Okay, well, I'm going to get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Surrendered and Abandoned Vessel Exchange Grant Application Workshop for 2020. We call this the SAVE program. My name is Ron Kent. I manage the SAVE program for California State Parks, Division in Boating and Waterways, and I'll be hosting this webinar today. This webinar is being recorded. I'm asking everyone to mute their video and their audio during the presentation. Please make note of your questions, and at the end we will open up the lines to accept questions. You'll be able to use the chat function, and please use the direct messaging. Again, please mute your video and your audio. Purpose of the SAVE grant. Division of Boating and Waterways is authorized in Harbors and Navigation Code Section 525 to provide grants to local public agencies for the abatement, removal, storage, and disposal of abandoned or surrendered recreational vessels, and for the removal of navigational hazards from California waterways. These grants increase public and navigational safety and reduce the potential of environmental contamination. The Surrendered and Abandoned Vessel Exchange or SAVE program allows grantees the ability to use funds for either removal of abandoned vessels previously accomplished through the Abandoned Watercraft Abatement Fund, or AWAF, or to receive surrendered vessels previously accomplished through the Vessel Turning Program, VTIP. The SAVE grant requires the grantee to contribute 10% match. Match can be either in-kind contributions or cash. Submitting a grant application. Grant applications must be submitted using DVW's online grant application system, OLGA. OLGA can be accessed from DVW's Grant and Loans homepage using the link provided on the slide. The application is now open, and the deadline to submit your SAVE 20 application is April 30th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Applicants are encouraged to watch a 45-minute webinar on using OLGA. This webinar is on YouTube, and the link is also provided on DVW's Grants and Loans homepage. Program changes. There have been several changes made to the SAVE 20 grant program as part of California State Parks' transformation effort. The grant application and scoring criteria have been revised to better assess how the funding requests will meet the objectives and priorities of the SAVE program. We now use an independent group to review and score grant applications. On February 21st, DVW hosted a focus group of stakeholders to review and provide feedback on the application and scoring revisions. The next few slides will highlight the new features of the grant application and programs. Application revisions. The revised SAVE application questions are now primarily yes or no and multiple choice. There are still some questions that will require a brief explanation. These spaces have limited characters allowed, so be concise. The score for each question are designed to weight the responses according to the objectives of Harbors and Navigation Code 525. The scores are weighted as follows. Prevention equals 20%. Control equals 20%. Cost efficiency equals 20%. Existence of an active enforcement program is 15%. The submerged navigation hazard abatement plan is 15%, and risk assessment of applicant is 10%. Minimum qualifications. The application starts with the minimum qualification section. Your agency must meet both of these qualifications to be eligible for SAVE grant funding. If you do not meet these qualifications, you will not be able to move on with the application. Qualification number 1, does your agency have an enforcement program? Some agencies are law enforcement. Others collaborate with law enforcement to complete the work. You will be provided a small space to describe your enforcement program. Qualification number 2. You are required to upload a document that shows your local authority to perform this work. Examples include a local ordinance or similar authorization for the removal and disposal of abandoned vessels. Do not cut and paste language from Harbors and Navigation Code. We will go through the topics and address. We will now go through the topics and address and score the application. As noted earlier, 15 points are available for the Submerged Navigation and Hazard Abatement Plan, which we call SNAP. SNAP should address prevention and removal of vessels, and it should also include a plan for removing items that are navigational hazards not related to recreational vessels, such as partially submerged objects, logs, abandoned piers, etc. In past SAVE grant applications, agencies would use Harbors and Navigation Code for their SNAP. The Harbors and Navigation Code is not a plan. Each applicant will be required to upload their plan for preventing and removing navigational hazards in their jurisdiction, and points will be earned according to the quality and thoroughness of the plan. Vessel Training Program. The revised application also includes several additional questions to assess the applicant's participation and promotion of preventive measures, one of which is the VTIP program. DBW is encouraging enhanced promotion and participation of the VTIP in VTIP by SAVE grantees in an effort to reduce costs associated with abandoned vessels. Cost effectiveness. Another improvement in the grant application are the questions on cost effectiveness. DBW is encouraging SAVE grantees look for ways that will provide maximum cost efficiency. Some ideas for accomplishing cost effectiveness include destroying multiple vessels at one time, working with marinas who can accommodate on-site destruction, finding ways for hauling vessels directly to landfills, and making arrangements with boat owners and meeting them at landfills. The revised application now includes a detailed budget page. In the first section, you will list the vessels you currently have both abandoned and turned in. You will include cost estimates of processing through destruction for each identified vessel. The second section, you will estimate the number of additional vessels you anticipate receiving over the life of the grant. That's approximately 2 years. The estimate could be based on past performance, records, current records of vessels that are being monitored, and/or list of owners that have contacted you wanting to turn in their vessels. At the bottom of the spreadsheet will be the total request plus your 10% match for a total project cost. Here's a screenshot of the budget page and the application information page. It's very important to note that the total request that you see here matches the amount of the request on this page, on your information page. It is also this total project cost on the budget page needs to match the project cost on the information page. If these numbers do not match, you will not be allowed to submit the application. I'm going to repeat that. If these numbers do not match, Olga will not allow you to submit the application. Application scoring. Scoring will be from independent reviewers. No SAVE program managers or others that may be involved with SAVE during the course of a grant agreement will be involved in scoring the applications, with one exception. Each application scorer will be provided a staff assessment of past grantee performance. This assessment will provide the scorer with information on the applicant's past grant management performance in terms of submitting accurate requests for reimbursement and responding to requests for additional information or revisions to reimbursement requests. These two items are only applicable to agencies that have a SAVE grant in the past 3 years. These questions will be worth up to 5 points each. Receiving an award. Once DBW determines awards, Olga will do one of two things. 1, generate a letter of denial. 2, generate a notice of award and instruction for executing the grant agreement. Do not begin work related to the award. I'm going to repeat that as well. Do not begin work related to the award. You do not have a fully executed agreement yet. Olga sends notice of these letters to the person that submitted the application. If the person leaves your agency, please notify DBW right away so we know who to contact. The award letter has specific instructions on downloading a copy of the grant agreement, where it needs to be signed and or initialed, as well as the need for a resolution from your agency's governing body to accept and sign the agreement. Once we receive the correct number of signed agreements, that's 3, with all signatures and initials necessary and a resolution, we will process the documents through DBW and Parks Accounting. Once we have all signatures in place, the grant manager will upload the fully executed agreement into Olga. Olga will generate and email the notice of fully executed agreement and instruction letter to the same person that applied for the grant. You can now begin work. Changes to grant agreement language. There are also a couple of minor changes to the grant agreement provisions. The requirement to have spent at least 50% of a grant to be eligible to apply for subsequent year grant has been removed. This is no longer a requirement. Navigational hazard removal and destruction may be considered with advance written approval from DBW. Inquire in advance of completing work with documentation, photos, and a narrative as to why the item is a navigational hazard. Other items directly related to SAVE activities that could create long-term cost efficiencies of vessel removal, disposal, and turn-in may be considered for reimbursement with pre-approval in writing from DBW. Reimbursement. Eligible expenses for AWAF. Raising of submerged vessels, hazardous material removal and disposal, towing and storage up to 90 days, lien sale expenses, vessel appraisal, salvage and demolition. Eligible expenses for VTIP, hazardous material removal and disposal, towing from agency to landfill, and demolition. Required documentation. A complete reimbursement claim will be submitted to DBW with the items listed on the slide attached. For AOF, we require a reimbursement claim form, vendor invoices, acceptable proof of payment, photo of a vessel or other identifier with CF number, proof of required matching funds or in-kind contribution. Required for VTIP, reimbursement claim form, vendor invoices, acceptable proof of payment, vessel photo showing CF or other identifier, proof of required matching funds or in-kind contribution, and a verification of ownership release of liability form. It is important to note that we only require one proof of payment and one photo. Submitting additional documentation beyond what we require is not necessary and creates delays in processing reimbursements. This is a sample of a revised reimbursement claim form. The most significant change is that the certification paragraph where you sign now states that you are certifying all vessels listed have been destroyed. And that paragraph is down here at the bottom. You'll need to download a copy of the revised version from Olga and replace your old versions. If a reimbursement request is submitted on an older form, it will be returned for your corrections. The 10% in-kind match boxes also need to be filled in appropriately. These two boxes here, depending on how much money you have for your in-kind match or whatever's left would be in cash. Those need to be filled in. This is a copy of the revised VTIP reimbursement claim form. The most significant change is that the certification paragraph you sign now states that you are certifying all vessels have been destroyed. Again, that paragraph is down here. I'm also going to reiterate the fact that these boxes need to be filled in. Again, you can download a version of this from Olga. Please replace your old versions. If you use an old version, it'll be replaced, or we will send it back. This is a copy of the revised in-kind match contribution form. The most significant changes are that you must list activities being claimed in date order. You can only list one staff per row, and you can only list one vessel per row. If you are claiming in-kind for 3 staff who work with the same vessel, you'll need to use a separate row to account for each person's time. You can download the revised versions from Olga and replace your old version. If you use an old version of the in-kind statement, it will be returned and you will be asked to make corrections. Those new revisions are listed here. This is a copy of the vessel release of interest and ownership form. Do not submit signed titles from registered owners, from a registered owner who is turning in a vessel. You must use this form for verification of ownership, release of ownership requirement. This form is also available on Olga. It is important that you fill out this form completely. The top part, this here, and then the bottom part here. If these aren't filled out correctly, we'll return them for corrections. This is my contact information. I want to remind you that the application is now open in Olga and will close at 5 o'clock on April 30th. Please note, I'm the best contact if you need assistance with Olga or any other program-related information. We will now open the chat function to accept any questions. The chat function is in the upper right-hand corner. Please select the direct message option.
Hi, this is Debbie. I'm going to read out the questions in case everybody can't see them. So we had the first, can everybody hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody else can.
Okay. So the first question is, are these program changes with forms, et cetera, for immediate use or new grant? And they are applicable to the new grant. The next question says, are there any substantive changes to the program over last year? And I don't, Karen, I feel like some of the changes we made that Ron just presented are substantive. Ron, is Karen unmuted?
Let me look. Hold on. Yeah, she's not muted. Are you there, Karen?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Debbie,
Yeah.
And Debbie can hear? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There are the application. There are quite a few substantive changes in the application, and you will see that once you start going through. It's form, the style, what we're looking for, how things are ranked and scored. As far as programmatic changes, there are some significant ones which Ron just went over. The 50% revision, where a 50% rule where we would not receive an application if the prior funding prior grant hadn't been spent up to 50%. That is gone. We are opening up the grant to be able to fund items if they can help you long-term reduce your costs of running the program. Some agencies in the past have purchased boat trailers that could work with any type of vessel, and then the agency committed to trailering and moving everything to a local landfill, which reduced the cost of abandoned vessels significantly, which allows them to do more with the money that they get. So programmatically, I mean, you're still removing vessels. The other programmatic change is we're in the business of removing abandoned vessels and receiving turned-in vessels, right? But quite a few questions come up when it comes to the navigational hazards. Now, navigational hazards is something that we can fund through the program, but the definition of what a navigational hazard is very specific. And that's why we're asking, and the requirement in this, everyone should take note. If it's not a vessel and it's just a navigational hazard, or what some might, it's a log, or it's a debris field, or it's a piece of a building that fell in, or a pile or something. Things that are not directly related to vessels need to be submitted to Ron for DBW's approval before you take it out. Now, you have all authority to remove it under the Harbor's navigation and under your local ordinances. But if you want the grant to pay for it, we have to agree in advance, in writing, that the grant that it is deemed a quote-unquote navigational hazard and the grant can pay for it. So those are significant items as far as managing the grant. These forms, of course, they're a little bit different. They're not hugely different, but we're hoping that that some of these tweaks will make it easier for our review and for auditing purposes. So you'll see some tweaks, but it's still the business of removing vessels. Hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you, Karen. That was very thorough. Okay, the next question is, do we not need to obtain a hard quote for removal of a specific abandoned vessel with the application? Can we estimate this cost based on previous experience? And the answer is yes. When you're submitting your application, if you want to estimate the cost of that specific vessel, you are welcome to do that. The next question says, please confirm every vessel and or hazard to be removed needs prior approval from DVW. I think Karen just answered part of that question, but no, we're not requesting you to get prior approval to remove a vessel, simply for the navigational hazard.
And to remind everyone, this is just recreational vessels. If it's clearly a recreational vessel, you are free to move forward.
Okay, and then the second part of that question is, if submitting a prior approval request to us, what would be the expected timeline for us to respond? Can we estimate that?
I mean, Ron, do you have an idea?
You know,
Some
it depends on it depends on the complexity. I mean, if it's something fairly simple, I'm sure we should get back to them within a week. But if it's something that we need to discuss internally, it would take longer. My approach would be to stay in contact with them as needed, so that they're aware of the process we're going through to try to get back to them as soon as possible with the resolution, with an answer. So my generic answer to that is within 2 weeks. But again, depending on the complexity, it may take longer.
And I want to make a note to what Ron was saying. The more clearly aligned the navigational hazard is with Harbors and Navigation Code Section 525, the easier it's going to be and quicker it's going to be for us to approve the navigational hazard. If something is a commercial vessel, for instance, and has recently been transitioned, or it's some kind of other use that does not clearly align with Section 525 of the Harbors and Navigation Code, that's when it's going to take some time to figure out. And we'll probably have several questions going back and forth. This last year we had a buoy that was floating around. Well, it was an Army Corps buoy, or sorry, Navy, Coast Guard. Is that a commercial, a military thing, or does that fit under the recreational vessel category? So the more complicated it is, the longer it will take. But you can look at Section 525 of the Harbors and Navigation Code, and that will, and read it clearly. It is very difficult to follow, but outline it, make sure everything's, and then check with Ron before you submit. And then we will be doing the same thing. We will always be going back to the Harbors and Navigation Code to make sure that your request aligns.
Okay, we have one more question. It says, we contract out for the removal and destroying of vessels. How does our agency show proof or prove that the vessels were destroyed? Our suggestion is that your contractor should be taking photos of these vessels. Normally, the photos that work the best for us show the vessel being dropped off at a landfill or you dumped into a dumpster, something of that nature. If nothing else, if you can at least get a photo of the vessel with the CF number, that would be optimal. Ron, do you have anything else to add? I mean, we can expect that their subcontractors would be taking photos, correct?
Yes, that's what we've asked them to do in the past. In this particular presentation, we've only asked for one photo of the boat or vessel to be submitted with the reimbursement request. But I think since they're signing off on the fact that it's going to be destroyed, that they should have their contractors keep photos of the fact that it was either busted up and put in a dumpster, busted up at the site, or dropped off at the landfill, that they can keep for their records, like they do the driver, the VTIP documentation, or some of their title search documentation. They can just keep it with those files. So yes, having their contractor take pictures of when it's destroyed would work.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is something that we're probably going to have to defer. It's what we're struggling with right now. And it says, will a commercial vessel that has been converted to a recreational vessel qualify for grant reimbursement? Can we answer that right now, or?
Technically, yes, but what we're finding is that quite a few people who have been trying to do that to skirt around the system, and so we are looking at we're working with our attorneys to try and figure out whether we will be funding those in the future or not. We do not have an answer on that question right now, but we do not want to promote that activity because it hugely depletes the fund from on uses that it was never intended for. As you all know, there's legislation that has attempted to go through the process for funding for commercial vessels. That has not come to fruition yet, but I urge you all to work with your legislative representatives to come up with something. This funding is for recreational vessels that were designed for recreational boating. But we will provide clarity on that once a determination has been met.
So at this moment, that was the last question. Let's see. Oh, wait, here comes another one. When are we expecting to be making the grant announcement awards? That was actually something we had submitted out in our press release, and we're estimating them to be awarded no later than August.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, when we're back on our regular schedule, it's July, August, and then when people are doing their getting the signatures and their resolutions, we usually get the contract signed and they're fully functional by October, November timeframe. This year, with some of the changes we made, things got delayed. So this year was a hiccup, but moving forward, we should stay on schedule.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yep. One more. We've answered this one, but we can answer it again. Do we need to use the new forms for our current grant? And that's no. We are rolling out the new forms for the next grant.
If you want to use the new forms, you're welcome to use the new forms. In the new grant, they will be required. And if the new forms are not used, we're just going to ship the whole package back to you without even looking at it. So please save us the time and use the new forms on the new one, but you can certainly start using it on the current grants as well.
Okay, just wait a minute or two, see if anybody else has a question. Getting some thank yous here.
Thanks
Any other questions?
for attending.
Right.
All right. Well, if there are no more
All right.
questions, we want to thank you all for coming. This is Karen Dill. We are attending. We hope you stay safe. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing out there in the fields for keeping our waterways safe for boaters and keeping the environment clean. I just really appreciate you all. Ron, do you have anything final to say?
No, just thanks for everybody attending this. I know it's been difficult over the last few weeks. It was kind of a struggle to get this together, but I think we did good. I think, and I want to appreciate everybody who signed up and was part of today's webinar. And let's get some boats out of the water.
Yes, and finally, we are going to be posting this video on YouTube with a link from our website as soon as it's ready. And if you want the PowerPoint presentation, please ask Ron, and he can send it to you.
Okay.
So everyone, stay safe, stay healthy.